You are a visionary, an entrepreneur, a business owner. You want to make money from your passion and create the freedom that you've dreamed of. But it's slow. The income is slow, the impact is slow, and the freedom is slow. And here's the kicker. You've actually never been busier. You're working longer than ever, burning through daylight, and your family have forgotten who you are. You're tired and frustrated and you can't even sleep well at night. The business just feels so heavy, and all you ever wanted to do was just make the money you want to make doing the things that you want to do. And that's where I come in. Hi, if we haven't met yet, my name is Dr. Brooklyn Storm, and I'm the host of the Business Acceleration Podcast, where we shift your business from heavy to light, time poor to time abundant, and from income lack to income growth. We're going to achieve it together with my 20 years experience as a psychologist. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business Acceleration Podcast. I'm super excited today because we are going to be speaking with an inspiration. Her name is Sabrina Runback and she's from Houston, Texas. Hi Sabrina, how are you? Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
So Sabrina, can you tell us just before we get started about your story and your journey, what do you do and who do you help?
Yeah, so I am a surgical provider in heart and lung surgery, and I'm also a speaker helping young professionals with demanding careers, especially those who are in healthcare and who are frustrated because they're working extensive long hours and overwhelmed, but able to fall back in love with their career again because they worked so hard so many years to achieve, and also feel that personal satisfaction and without compromising their well-being.
Wow, that sounds really huge and really inspiring. So your day job at the moment is that your 9 to 5, so to speak, is you're working in surgery for heart and lung. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so how did you get into doing this other work?
Yeah, so about 4 years ago, there was an early morning. I was having a fever of 101 while operating surgery. And my nurse was kind enough to sneaking in Dayquil and cough drop under my mask to keep me going. At the moment, I thought to myself, how could my childhood passion working in medicine and living the American dream turn into such an unhealthy reality? Then top that off, when I called in sick the next morning because I really couldn't get out of bed, my manager made me feel like I was inconveniencing him. Then a few weeks later, I took care of a young man who's in his early 30s who required fourth open heart surgery because he had an infection in his heart valve. He failed to report his new symptoms and thinking they were small and insignificant. I think that's the moment when I realized I have these small and insignificant things in my life that if I don't address them, then I will become a patient myself. Because I used to say yes to too many things, right? The default is, I got this, of course I'll do it. It becomes such a natural thing to say yes. But now I know when you say yes to too many things, it actually hurts us. Well, society taught us to be nice to people, to be polite, to say yes, do other people a favor, right? However, when we say yes to the things that don't align with our true core value, like all this side project we keep picking up, the committees that we're signing up to help out, but we actually wouldn't be able to deliver the high quality result that we know we can do, and might feel resentful for doing it. And sometimes we couldn't even keep our promises that we made. And I think that's the moment I realized that I have to do something different. I'm no longer going to allow myself to do things that drains me. would do things that would actually uplift me and give me that motivation and keep me going. So that's how I dived into research, reading, committee, using psychology, neuroscience, which is part of my background as well, to come up with a system, what I call say no to distractions and say yes to stamina. And that really turned my life around. So yeah, that's the journey.
That's such an incredible journey. I really loved hearing the metaphor between seeing the male patient in his early 30s, not recognizing the little symptoms, thinking that they were insignificant, and how you were able to use that as a context to interpret what was happening for you in your life as well.
Yeah, I think it's that when we think our default mode is I'm able, I'm capable, I'm okay, we are relatively healthy, and you don't have any pre-existing conditions. And so anything happened to you, right? Doesn't matter if you're just feeling exhausted, you're sick all the time, you would think to yourself, oh, it won't be stress. It just, I caught this bug and never get over, right? But it can be very much stress related or some type of trap emotion, right? Like things that offset balance, that hidden and that give you that roadblock you're not realizing. And then for the patient, if we're thinking we're young, oh, just this fever, maybe it's I caught a flu that's not resolving. So even when you go to the ER, go see your primary care, you're not gonna express everything, right? Clearly, because we minimize our symptoms. I feel like especially in medicine, in healthcare, is that way. That if you ask for help, that's seen as a weakness instead of it's actually a sign of courage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think too, I mean, although it's 2020 now, I think, I have two businesses, and one is running a allied health practice. And even in that, as a psychologist, we still see a lot of stigma around mental health. And there's still stigma today, especially with men, in terms of saying that they're not okay and asking for help.
Right. I mean, for sure. I think we always think about mental health is something somehow weakens us, but anxiety is something that's so prevalent that 1 out of 3 people don't even seek help when they have symptoms. And then you progressively becomes minimizing what you're truly feeling, right? That mental and physical exhaustion. And then you start become like a blaming game, right? Nothing is really going right. So how long are you accepting the negativities, allowing this to just sit there? And then of course all these are compounding, right? Like things will just add on to each other and eventually will push people into that complete exhaustion, going to full on depression, suicidal. And of course there are other people who use drug or alcohol as a way to remove them from their current state. So I think it's a big issue when it comes out to burnout, and it's in all fields.
Yeah. And so, how does this relate to what you're developing now in terms of your work around stamina?
I believe that because we work so hard to get to where we are, we deserve to love it, right? We spend the years of training, money, debt, put ourselves to that physical exhaustion to get through the medical program, right? You're drinking like from a fire hose when you're in it. I think all of us feel the same way. And then all you can think about is how much can I remember? Let me just take this test and go on to the next one. But once we get into field, you're expected to perform. So there's an even higher level of pressure. So my thinking is, if we put all this effort in, can we find that love again? Changing our mindset completely to say, when I step into this role, what was the passion then? What was that something that's so intriguing, right? Can we find that interest and then adding on to the novelty, right? So someone who I work with, he started changing. A nurse has been in case management for hospital for a while, and then he started changing departments because he feels less satisfied. But then he found a problem within the department where they didn't have enough rehabilitation for ICU patient. And now this become a new project of him, and of course it's outside his regular role, but he find interest in, he see himself as serving bigger community, and it's such a need, right? And of course the rest of us are very supportive of this decision because it's for the greater benefit. And for him, he doesn't see as, oh, I just add something onto my plate, but it's that newfound passion to see what can I do additionally. in, Even though, yes, we all have things we like and dislike, but can we find something new that we like? Or do more of what we like and do less of what we don't like? How can we delegate things?
And so, do you find that people generally come to this realization that they're not happy and that they need to do something else when they've been having a difficult experience in work for a long period of time? Like, is it a case that, you know, there needs to be, in terms of, I guess, spirituality, we'll be looking at contrast. So there would have to be this moment where you realize this isn't for me anymore, or I'm not happy, or I'm burning out, and it feels like everything's coming down on top of you and there's all of this pressure and you can't see the light for all of the darkness. But then you realize over time, you work through that by seeing new opportunities, and you end up finding something else that seems to feel a little bit better, and then you can create a new attitude from that space. Sometimes things happen for us.
Right, exactly. I think through my journey, I also experiencing that. In a sense, I was burning out. I was doing a lot, right? Like, you're still doing very valuable work, but it becomes a machine, right? You just constantly going, going, going. But then what I realized is, like, I love to teach, and I start to be more involved with students, with my PE students, medical students, MP students, talking to the nurses about where they wanted to go for their advanced education. And I think I was in that teaching route even since I was only doing public health like 10 years ago. So I realizing something that what I enjoy more is not just patient care, right? I started with just patient education, but it's also teaching your peers or the new one upcoming. And that's where things start morphing, because you can tailor your direction. I'm still in the same career path, right? Like, I didn't change it, but I realizing what else that I would do to enjoy more. So I think that's part of clarity, because if we become a hamster on the running wheel and you just keep going, and you start losing sight on the things that actually will motivate you from within.
Yeah, that intrinsic motivation is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
What's your advice for people about how they can tune into their intrinsic motivation?
I would say it definitely requires some like internal work. It's not easy, right? We don't just sit around, it's like, oh, what do I want to be today, right? Like, it does take some time. And usually I advise, we all deserve to have a date with ourselves sometimes, right? Whether it's just for your self-care, for decompressing, give yourself that stamina reboot session, whatever it is, why share with people. But to begin all this is getting clarity on what your strengths and weaknesses are. And then asking yourself from your strength, how is that correlate to your core value, right? And sometimes just to say, can I just only pick 3 words that would describe my core value and only live into just those 3 words and not get distracted by everything else, at least we become more focused and then have a direction on where to go.
I think, yeah, that word focus is so important. It's really easy, I think, when you're in business to get very distracted. And, we see this a lot. Some of the coaching clients that I work with and people in my groups and stuff, they often start with a annual planner. So it's January now. A lot of them have gone and bought new planners and they'll stick to them for a little while, and then everything will drop away. And it's because, things happen in the business. And I think for a lot of us, we become very reactive instead of perhaps proactive. So I think you're saying that if we can understand what our strengths are and marry those up with perhaps our top 3 core values, and we actively in day-to-day business try and lean into them, that will really help us to stay on the right path for our own happiness. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, funny thing is, I actually just ran this morning a your best yet workshop to say how do you design your stamina, and it is a long-term thing and it's also a short-term thing. So how I was thinking about goals, there are the end goals, right? Something that's uplifting, is great, like just like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Second one is begin with the end in mind. The way he wrote it is like, oh, if you walk into a funeral, how do you want people to remember you? No, I don't want it to think about negatively, but I wanted to think about positively in a way of from today until December 31st, right? Where do I see myself? And can I be specific about it? And it can even be things a little bit outside our reach, because then once you kind of get to that point but you haven't hit it, you're like, hey, I did pretty well, right? Like I'm almost there. But if it's too easily reachable, then you're just like, maybe I didn't do enough, right? And then once we set that big uplifting goal, now we dial down to something that's measurable, specific, attainable, achievable, right? That we can do either on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis. And my third step in the workshop was we have to have some kind of metric to track the progress, means setting deadlines and saying I have to get done by certain time, or I will get X amount of clients, or I will be able to publish this paper, whatever it is matching our goal. And also, once you're able to meet that goal, live into those joy of wins, right? I had the problem before is that I don't allow myself to appreciate the win. When we're in a mode of doing, you're just, oh yeah, I got this done. Okay, great, next, right? Instead of allow yourself to take a little bit pause to say, hey, I did really well today. Yeah, that it should be a big check mark, right? Like not just like a tiny check mark to say I just got it done, but you should be rewarded, feel appreciated that we did something good. It doesn't have to be a big win, right? Like little wins will build up the confidence and confidence into competency, right? But all of this start with action. If we didn't take that action, we can't feel the rest of the greatness.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for people that you work with?
I think biggest challenge for most people is not procrastination. I think most people work with are very much have an idea they want to do it, but it's the overwhelm internal and external expectations. It's feeling like, oh, I have so many great ideas, but I'm not able to get it done. Like I think it's that self-talk is what if I couldn't, right? Or what if I'm not enough? What if I didn't do enough? That's what kind of holding us back. And so that negativity, of course, with our already long to-do list, that drains our stamina, especially if we're not allowing ourselves to refill our our energy from within, and both mentally and physically.
And so, how would people recognize what was a noteworthy symptom that they weren't happy, or that they weren't motivated, or that they didn't have the stamina, as opposed to a symptom that they might just feel is a little niggle and they shouldn't really give it much attention?
So I feel like that is a threshold thing, right? I think for everybody, we should always pay attention to our body, our mind. You know when things change. Nobody else would know but yourself. And when there is a change, doesn't matter if it's small or big, you should notice that, right? Notice that change. Why is there a change? Like, even question it, right? If we just ignored it, then it become buried. And if you bury enough of those problems, that can create a subconscious fear or inhibition, and therefore it's like something that's trapped emotion or trapped underneath that you didn't even know what's happening. So for me, is be able to have that courage to say, let me see what's up, right? Like, what is this? It can be so small, it's non-significant when you bring up to surface. Then you, at least you know, and you can put it aside. But if it's something that bothers you and you didn't actually address that, but later on it pop into your mind, that could be a lot worse than if you just confront it right away, and it wouldn't be as much of an issue.
Yeah, so that was kind of my next question. It was going to be, what are the risks to people if they don't pick up on this? And, you know, the flip side of that is, what can they gain in terms of overall satisfaction with their work if they do start to pay attention and then make informed change from there?
Right. So there, when we manifesting things, right? So when we talk about spirituality, there are also 4 different blockers. And it very much aligning to what we're talking about. There are people who are what's it called, like, where they read all the books, they try really hard, they listen to everything, they really wanted to solve this, but they're trying so hard, they get themselves stuck, right? And they and then there are the ones who are super pushy. They just want it so badly, and they can't think to, like, nothing else but achieving, right? And then what that means, you're not actually open to receive the goodness. You just push yourself into a point that you can't even feel the goodness coming to you, right? And you're stuck. And then it's the fear part. Yes, if we just constantly worry about things, right? Fear is something of the unknown in the future, versus depression, something we already experienced and we're questioning about, and like, we don't want to deal with. But if we know it's a fear, and when we talked about earlier, and just bring it to surface, it's the fear really that bad, right? Like, allow yourself to write it down, or talk about it, address it. If we don't address it, and then it become 10,000 question mark, and then you can go a rampage of like truckload of things, right? And then the last one would be natural tendency of having a judgment, right? And if we are in the position to judge, that instead of coming into an equal opportunity to say, well, everyone can have a different perspective, right? And if you didn't actually open yourself up to learn from other perspective, and you just become deflective, then you're also not able to live into whatever that you're hoping to get, because none of us are really much above anybody else. So when we come to a judgment instead of understanding, then also, of course, we're not reflecting the positive energy that there should be.
Yeah, I mean, people absolutely have to be coachable, don't they? If they want to make change, there needs to be a readiness to acknowledge what's not going well for that person. There has to be a willingness to learn about what they can do next. They have to be willing to explore what's going on and why it's happening and how they would prefer things to be, and then to take that action and, of course, to remain focused. And do you think it's harder for some people to live into their strengths as they correlate to their core values when they don't have a lot of support around them? And the reason I'm asking is because there's a number of female business owners that work from home that listen to this podcast, and they sometimes feel like they don't have much support from their friends or family, you know, because the money's not showing up yet. And so now they're starting to hear, oh, you should just go back to your real job if you haven't made any money in another 2 weeks.
Yeah, I feel like I totally relate. I think now, like, yes, female entrepreneurs, and then even males are, I think, same thing, except I think because our personality tendency is different, right? We take it into heart a lot more on what other people think of us, versus the male tendency is different. However, female, male aside, I really like Gretchen Rubin's book when you talk about 4 different personality tendencies. And one of them is the upholder, means you want both the external and internal very much aligned to a certain rule, right? Like you know this is what society wants, this is what outside, and you know what you want. I'm really keeping my line. If someone wanted to question me and keep me off track, then it feels unease, right? And then there are people who don't really care about the external expectations, right? They simply question it. It's not to say they reject everything, but they want to ask the question to say, why do we do some certain things? Can we improve on it? And so they question that, not to challenge, but it's also like, at least give me a reason of what your purpose are. And then there are very much aligned with the internal. If I believe this, I will definitely keep myself on track. I'm good at keeping my goals. I'm good at changing if I believe this is something that I truly need to do. And then there are swing into the rebels, where they just don't really care about external rules. If you tell me something, I'm definitely not doing it. And then internally, they also have this battle. Oh, it would be nice to prepare dinner for my mom, but then she told me to do it. Now I don't want to do it, right? Like, so it's constant battle. But then there are also the people is almost like the people pleasers who really care about the external accountability. People are counting on them to serve, but then they start losing of internal. They're not really sure who they are internally. They thought their internal desire is to help other people. So you have all these tendencies in both female and male, but I believe that if we're in that tendency of we're very much sure about who we are, right? And then the external tendency wouldn't affect us as much, right? Like we're not needing the accountability of someone else to keep us going. But even put that aside, all of us, of course, naturally want support, right? I'm the person who is that questioner. I question all this external things of, oh, this is the rule by the organization. I'm like, why? Can't we do different things? Even you did it for 10 years, but maybe we can do it better. And internally, I'm really good about keeping myself on track. I set goals, make them real. I do a visualization session. I make that connection and get clarity. I'm going. But nevertheless, of course, I wanted my family, my husband to feel supported. And when they will question you on like, oh, did you get enough return on this? Like, what did you actually learn about this course, right? Is your strategy working? And those are actually not the right questions, right? From outsider standpoint, because we know no matter what we've gone through, it is a learning progress, and we learn something good through it. You only fail if you stop. You only fail if you lay down and you couldn't stand up, right? And so that's the difference is when people see you grow, progressing, they will clap for you. But when people see you doing something that is not connecting with who they are, they will question you, no matter who you are. And it does take a little extra thick skin to say, is this something that I still enjoy doing? Right? If it's really my passion, if I enjoy doing and I'm learning every day, building myself and my professional desire, then yes, it's intriguing enough to keep going. But if people start become unclear about what that end goal is, right? And it's they couldn't really imagine it enough or like make it at least feel real, and there's not enough a path, then there should be a rethinking of our path, of our chances, of can you do something differently to still bring you to that end goal. And if you stop enjoying what you're doing, then why are you doing it? And ask some of the harder questions.
Now, that is so aligned with, a lot of the work that we do in spirituality as well, operating from what feels good, being able to paint that picture in your mind, as you were saying, of what you want to see differently in your business or what you want to see differently in your life. Being able to paint that picture in your mind of that goal. One of the things I like to do is I like to imagine that I'm flying in business class on, a 20-hour flight, and I've got the bed and I've got the space all to myself, and I'm getting doted on by the flight attendants, and I can imagine the blanket, and I can imagine the champagne, and I can imagine looking out the window, and I try and put as much detail into that as I can. And that's just an example of a simple way that people can visualize a goal. That's all we mean when we're talking about visualizing. It's just being able to use as much sensory information as you can when you do it, so that it makes it more powerful and stronger, because you can connect to it better then. And I think too, one of the most powerful things about a visualization in terms of helping us along our path is that a visualization, I think, if you do an extended version and you take it, from something that's quite small to something a little bit more elaborate, I think too that resonates on a deeper level with our subconscious mind, because it's a story. And so stories tend to bypass that critical factor, don't they?
Yeah, for sure. Because all our five senses sight, it's something related deeply with our memories, our stimulation. So if you're creating these pictures for yourself, what I teach is doing. You can even do this daily on the visualization meditation to what I call, you can plan out your day without having a written plan. Right? So you're manifesting and you're visualizing what are each task, even including what you could potentially eat, who you might meet for lunch, like all these little details. And you create this perfect day already. And then you start matching up to it. You already began on a really good note, right? So when we say that our expectation matches our result, so if we create a visualization of positive expectation, then we'll live into that result and bring us to that result.
I love it. Now, I think you were saying before we started recording that you have something that might be able to help our audience. Can you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I believe my process of say no to distraction and say yes to stamina is because ultimately we're able to say no to specific things, so then we can say yes and create a heck yeah life. But having that heck yeah life requires conscious intentions, and to begin that is knowing your strengths and weaknesses. So for everyone who's listening, I have a free gift for you, and it is a 3-minute free quiz to discover your hidden roadblock. And then once you bring that into surface and you know how to then address it, then things will become easier. And you can grab the quiz at sabrinarumback.com/assessment. And Runback spell RUNBECK.
And I will put all of the links to Sabrina's amazing work in the show notes as clickable links. So you guys can just tap on those and you'll be taken directly to all of her social pages, and you'll be able to have a look at that quiz and do that as well. So Sabrina, just before we finish up, I was wondering, do you have any last words of wisdom or advice for the people that might be listening?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I like to address, one of my key process step is to say no to putting yourself last. Because when we are able to put ourselves first, then you can the best version of you, not what's left of you.
Oh, I love that. I want that on a t-shirt. I really like that. I want to, say no to putting yourself last. I think that should be motto of the week. It's very empowering. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being on the podcast, Sabrina. I truly, truly, truly appreciate it more than you know. And I'm sure everything that you've shared has resonated with so many of the people, the beautiful souls that listen to this podcast. And I'm sure it's helped them just so much. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. And thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much for listening today. I really hope that you enjoyed it and got a lot of value from it. Help me help others by sharing this podcast. And if you feel called to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, remember to let me know so that I can send you a very special thank you gift. Now go and build your dream business, and I will see you next time. Bye.